Okay, thanks. So yeah, as Wes mentioned, I'm up here in Box Elder County, and we're getting a lot of snow, so we're glad to be indoors today. So, Utah is a great climate for growing tree fruits. We have a nice summertime climate that is relatively warm, but it's nice and dry. And as we get talking about diseases and that a little bit later on in today's presentation, you'll see why that's important. We've got some different changes in elevation, anywhere from the St. George area clear up to 4,500 feet, 5,500 feet in elevation. And so that really determines kind of the length of our growing season in some of these places. And then we also have winter temperatures that helps us depict what zone we're in. And so we're just going to kind of look at some different things. Here's kind of a short list of some of the different tree fruits that we grow here in Utah and kind of along the northern Utah and Wasatch Front area, with kind of the larger font ones being the main crops that we see, tree fruits in Utah. And then we do have some smaller areas of Japanese plums, pears, and things like that. And so Utah is a great climate for producing these tree fruit items here. One of the things that I kind of mentioned is that Utah, we've got a large span. You can see on this frost-free days with the number of last spring frost and fall frost for different places in Utah. You can see that St. George is the by far the longest with about 225 frost-free days. And then a majority of places along kind of the Wasatch Front is about 145, 180 days. And then we've got, if you're back over in some of the more mountainous country where Heber City, Park City, and those, you're looking at about 85, 90, less than 100 frost-free days. And so that can really depend upon what we have success in growing as far as tree fruits because of those frost-free days that we've got there. And just because you're not mentioned on the slide here, you can go out to the Utah Climate Center and find those frost-free days for your location. Just a quick map here showing kind of where that is major grown. So the white, or excuse me, the red dots are going to be where we've got major fruit being produced, apples, peaches, cherries. And then you can see Logan's got some minor stuff. And then obviously along Salt Lake, you can grow any of that, but it's just not a major when you're talking acres and acres of fruit tree production being grown here in Utah. I threw up a plant hardiness zone map because it's important when we talk about fruit production that we understand what zone we're trying to grow in. And I like this one. This is one that's been updated in 2023. And if you just Google USDA plant hardiness zone map, you'll get different ones out there. The reason why I like this one is because you can go into it at the top here, and you can see I put my zip code in here at the top, and then tell it to search, and it tells me that I'm in Tremont, Utah, and then it gives me some information about my zone. And you can see that I am in 2023. They told me that I'm a 6B, and that my coldest temperature that I get in the wintertime is about 0 to -5 degrees in that 6B range. And you can kind of see that that average is from 1991 to 2020. And you can see that from back when they made it in 2012, they were going back even further. And we can see that it really has not changed probably in the last 30, 40 years from kind of that 6 zone B. And so that helps me to then, when I go out and start looking at what I can grow as far as tree fruit here in Utah, if I'm a zone 6B, you can see that between everything right here, I'm pretty much right down the middle of it. And so all of this is very accessible to growing here in my climate, in my county or in my town. Remember with your zones that the lower the number, so a zone 3 is going to be colder than a zone 4 or zone 5 or 6. And so, zone 8s and 9s are going to be out in warmer climates like out into California and that. One of the things that we're concerned with, and you'll see how those zones and that play in effect, is when we talk about chill units, because all of our fruit needs what's called a chill unit. And if you put that into Chat GPT because you don't know what that is, basically what that is it's kind of a resting period in the fall time of the year between fall and springtime of the year when those trees are collecting those chill units, and it's cumulative. So it starts in the fall, goes to the springtime of the year, and it's temperatures between 32 and 45 degrees is how it accumulates those. And that's important when you throw a slide up like this, because if we start here, you can kind of see the various amounts of chill units that fruit crops need. And if we start here at the bottom, we see citrus is anywhere from 0 to 300 chill units in that time frame. And so that's one of the, we get, I looked out on the Utah Climate website, and here in Utah, we're up in that 850, 900 chill units right now that we're accumulating. And so we've still got, for anything that's over, 900 chill units, we still got a little bit more of those temperatures we need to get for those. And we need those so that so those trees are going to fruit and flower and fruit for us. Even within those, so say, for example, if you look at peaches right here in the center, we've got peaches that need about 600 chill units, and we have others that need 1,000 chill units. And early Alberta is about 800 to 850. And so that's where you look at, if you see you've got early blooming peaches, mid blooming peaches, and late blooming peaches, that's because they require different amounts of chill unit hours. And so those late blooming ones are going to be up in those 1,000, 1,200 range that they're going to have to get. And so those are going to be those really dormant type ones. Well, everybody knows that Utah is known for their early Alberta peaches. And as I mentioned, they need about 800, 850 chill units. Well, what happens if I throw this question out there, what would happen if we were to take this tree out to California where it's much, much warmer? And the question that follow up is going to be, would that tree survive out in California, and would it produce fruit? Tree's going to do just fine, probably not going to produce because it's not going to meet those chill unit requirement hours. And so you can see that's why when you go into California, you're probably not going to see an early Alberta peach tree, but you are going to see another variety that has different chill unit requirements that will grow just fine for them out there. The other thing that's important is realize too that if you're out in California and you bring something here to Utah, that tree is probably not going to survive because it's probably something like a zone 8 or a zone 9 peach tree and is not going to survive in the wintertime. Other things as a homeowner or a backyard grower you need to be familiar with is going to be pollination requirements. And if you look over here on the right of the chart where we say, peaches and nectarines are self-fruitful. Well, what does that mean? What basically that means is that I can have an early Alberta peach tree and I can live 5 miles from my nearest neighbor. And as long as that tree is in bloom and I've got bees that are moving that pollen from the anther over to the stigma here, it's going to pollinate that flower, and I'm going to have early Alberta peach trees on that. I don't have to have a second peach tree in order for that tree to produce fruit. And so if we look at our chart, you can see that nectarines are the same way, tart cherries are the same way, and then you've got some of them that are self-fruitful and others that need cross-pollination. So if we look at that cross-pollination, apples is one of those that needs cross-pollination. And when we talk cross-pollination, we're not talking about I need to have a peach and an apple and they're going to cross-pollinate. No, it's going to be apples to apples, peaches to peaches, pears to pears, okay? What we need is, for example, a gala apple and a red delicious apple tree in our neighborhood or somewhere close by, that the bees are going to move that pollen from that gala tree over to the red delicious and going to take the pollen from the red delicious over to that gala tree, and we're going to have fruit on both of those things. And so it's important to realize that if you do need something that needs cross-pollination, you do have two different varieties of apple, two different varieties of pears. And so, go out and look at that, pull those pollination charts up. The other thing that it reminds us is that, they need to be blooming at the same time so that those bees can move that pollen back and forth when we have that, okay? We don't have a lot of time here to go over recommendations as far as different things, and so I'm just going to show you Utah State University has a lot of different publications out there on apples and peaches and plums and apricots. So go Google that, look at those if you're interested in certain varieties, finding out whether they need what their zone can be grown in, whether or not they do well here in Utah, and if they need cross-pollination or if they're self-fruitful. So go look at those where they're there. Another thing that comes into play when you're looking at fruit trees is the rootstock. The rootstock is going to help us as far as how big that tree is going to get. And I know there's one that's a presentation that's following up here with peach rootstocks, but think of the trees that are big trees. So apple trees can get big, cherry trees are going to get big. Those are the ones where most of the rootstocks are being developed, or if they have a disease or something that affects them. And so if you go into the nursery or you're looking at a catalog, they may say this is a standard tree. That means that's going to be a great big tree. Some of the other terms you're going to hear, this is a semi-dwarf and this is a dwarf. And even but in those areas, we have a lot of range as far as how big those trees are going to get based upon the rootstock that they are grafted onto. Just to help you, if you like to visually see that, let's say, for example, we have a standard apple tree that's going to get 30 feet by 30 feet in diameter. I have one tree, it's red delicious. I get, maybe 6, 8, 10 bushels of apples off of that tree that's red delicious. The great thing about if I use dwarfing rootstocks, if I use semi-dwarf rootstocks, now in that same footprint as that big mature standard apple tree, now I can put 4 different apple trees. So something like a zester, which is an early variety of apple. I can put a gala, which is kind of an early to mid, and I can put a honeycrisp that's a mid, and I have a cameo. So now I have 4 different varieties of apples in that same footprint that I had one standard apple tree. And if I go even further and put it on dwarfing rootstocks, now I have 9 different apple trees varieties that will produce in that same footprint as that one big standard tree. And so that's what that rootstock does for us, is it keeps those trees smaller. It also sometimes will give us some disease resistance, like for example, fire blight. Some of the new rootstocks for apples has fire blight resistance in it. But this is what you're going to see is this is going to be the rootstock. Here's going to be my graft unit, and this is going to be my variety of tree that I get. So the early Alberta, the Fuji apple, or whatever. Okay, so that's what you're going to see when you go into the nursery and you buy those trees. If you haven't been to one of the botanical centers or someplace that has demonstration, I highly encourage you to go out and look at those. This is a couple of trees that we have at the Utah Botanical Center showing, trying to show people what that big apple tree is going to look like. Here's a tree that we've got that's pruned small that we're keeping against a fence area. And so it gives you a great idea to look at and see how those trees are, how big they're going to get, how do we prune them. And so just go out to those botanical centers if you haven't been to one. Within those places also, you're probably going to see some different pruning styles or different methods that you're going to see out there. As a horticulturist, I really don't care which way you prune your trees to. I just want you to prune your trees and prune them annually. So we can kind of see, here's a modified central leader tree. Here's what's called an open vase, open center tree on our right. And basically those trees are pruned every year. We've got plenty of fruiting wood on them and, nice healthy trees. And so that's advantage of going out. Now you might say, man, I'm just concerned about, pruning on trees. If you are nervous about pruning, there's some USU Extension handouts on pruning trees. There's also some good videos out there. Go look at those. Go attend some of those pruning workshops that they have at some of those botanical centers or garden centers, okay? The other thing that's important if you're going to be growing fruit trees is to realize that in the springtime of the year, you're probably going to want to watch the temperatures really close. And if you look at where those orchards are planted, most of those orchards are planted up on the benches of the valley. And the reason why they put those up there is for drainage purposes, for frost protection. This kind of shows you that, that cold air is going to come off the mountain, it's going to come through the canyon, wherever, and it's going to come settle out there in the lowest spot in the valley floor. And there can be a difference of anywhere from 10 to 15 degrees between that valley floor and up here on the bench where we have our orchard planted. And that's critical when we get looking at a freeze event. And in extension, we get a lot of phone calls, people wondering, hey, it's getting down to 32 degrees. What can I do? Is it going to damage my fruit buds? Here's a couple of different publications. One of them's in Spanish, one of them's in English, that talks about the temperatures and what those buds can stand. But I just want to kind of show you, let's say, for example, right now, if I went out to my orchard and I said that, oh man, my peaches look about right here at this calyx green stage. And it's, after the snowstorm, it's probably going to get cold. How cold is it going to get? At this stage right here at calyx green, if the temperatures get down below 21 degrees for 30 minutes, I'm going to lose about 10% of my blossoms. At 5 degrees, I'm going to lose about 90% of my fruit blossoms. And so I've got a range of about 16 degrees right there that before I really have a total loss in my fruit production. If I fast forward and let's say, here in another month, my trees have bloomed and I maybe have some fruitlets, some small fruits on them right here, and I'm what's called the shuck split stage. And notice that my temperature, if I get down to about 28 degrees for 30 minutes, I'm going to lose about 10% of the bloss of the fruit. And if I get down to 25 degrees, I'm going to lose 90% of the fruit. And so that's very small. I've got 3 degrees to kind of play with right there. I point out here that on like tart cherries, sweet cherries, those, I really don't need to have every blossom or every bloom on that tree set. Otherwise, I'm overcropping. I need about 50% of those blossoms that will produce fruit for me to have a fruit full load. And about 10 to 15% of my blossoms on my apples, peaches, and pears, and I'll have a full load. So a light frost does me a lot of good because I don't have to do a lot of thinning. Well, how do I find out how cold it's going to get, what my temperatures are going to be? Again, if you go out to the Utah Climate Center, click on Utah Traps here in the center, it then provides a map here. Each one of these little dots is a different weather station that is maybe in your area that you can click on. And then what it does is it records the temperatures. And so it looks at what the temperatures are going to be, but then it also shows you what the temperatures were. So you can see this light colored blue line is showing me my minimum temperatures for over, looks like from January 17th through February 16th. And then it shows me my maximum. Well, that's great because I can see, well, wow, look, January 30th, I got down to about 21 degrees. And so if I would have had fruit out there, obviously it would have frozen that and I would have lost it. The other thing that the website does for us is we can go in and look at it. And so remember we said, okay, how long does it stay at those temperatures? Well, I pulled this up yesterday. You can see at 8:30 in the morning, and this was the coldest part of the evening and the morning. I was down to about 40 degrees, 39 and a half, 35 degrees, 34 degrees. And so that didn't get cold enough to really do any damage to my fruit. And so I didn't really have to worry about that event. And so I can track that and see that out on those weather stations. Well, maybe you're saying, I don't have a weather station near me. There's some nice, here's a Taylor weather station that is, for 15, 20, 30 bucks, I can go out and buy. I put the sensor in my trees, put this in the house. I can set an alarm so if it starts getting down to about 34 degrees, I can go out and do something about that. And then you've got a more expensive one here on the right-hand side. So those types of things are available to help me track weather if I don't have a weather station by me. Well, let's say there's going to be a frost event. What can I do? The top 4 of these are ones that most homeowners can do. If we've got those smaller trees, I can go put a blanket over top of them. I can go put maybe some charcoal briquettes or a fire underneath there, anything to raise those temperatures a few degrees to hopefully save my fruit. Now, I show some pictures here of some big fans of that. If you go down around Santa Juan and out in California where the grapes and stuff are at, you're going to see these types of fans that are basically their whole purpose is to keep that cold air from settling down in that valley floor, down in where the fruit or my vineyard is at, and circulate that and raise that temperature 1 or 2 degrees so that I can get fruit on my trees. And that's their whole purpose is for frost protection. Because this is the last thing you want if you're a homeowner or a commercial grower. This is a frost event that happened. Remember, I told you that you've got early, mid-season, late blooming things. These are some peaches on the same frost event. You can see this bud here at the top left of your screen. That fruitlet right there is damaged. That's going to fall off. And you'll see this coloration change in about 4 or 5 hours after a frost event, freeze event. Here we got another one, another variety, a little bit more protected. You can see that if that was pollinated, I'm going to have fruit. And then you can see this one that was much, much tight in that blossom that is going to be fine. So those are some what you're looking for after a frost freeze event is these two on the left side or right side here. Many of you probably question as to why your fruit trees, have a bloom that's going to open up, and then several days later you're going to have more into where that tree's in full bloom. And that's the whole reason. If this blossom right here in the center gets frozen off, we've got several others that are going to be blooming in the next couple of days that are not going to, hopefully not going to be frozen, and they will produce fruit for me. Then I'm going to tell you that you basically are going to have to thin your crop. And so, as I mentioned, we don't need a full load. We don't need every blossom that's going to set fruit. I just need a 10 to 20% of my peaches and nectarines and apples. Otherwise, I'm going to have to pull fruit off of it. And we thin because we want a better fruit color. We want larger fruit. We want, maybe we got a tree that blooms heavy or fruits heavy one year and light the next. Basically, if we come in and remove a bunch of that fruit off, I tell you, if you use this is a good measuring stick. If you got an apple or a peach that touches here and here, anything in between, you're going to pull it off. And so on this branch that's in the picture, I'm going to leave maybe 3 to 4 fruits on that and pull everything else off of it. Otherwise, we're going to see a lot of heavy fruit load and a lot of damage that's going to be done to those. You can look this up, but there's differences in what we call a freestone or a clingstone peach and a semi clingstone there. If you've got animals, I know there's talk later on about those, deer, if you got deer in the area that are in the fall time are going to come rub on those trees, you want to protect them. And so I won't steal their thunder. The other thing you're going to need to worry about is birds. Birds love sweet cherries. This is what I've had to do to my tree to be able to have cherries on it. And basically, there's some T-posts with some PVC pipe that I'm able to pull this netting up over it and exclude those birds from coming in there in that area. Insects. If you're going to plant a fruit tree, you need to take care of your insects. And again, USU Extension has some really good publications out there on some of the different insect pests that you're going to see. The last thing you want to do is throw a bunch of those sweet cherries in your mouth and find out that you've got Western cherry fruit fly larvae in there. A lot of these apples are going to fall off because of the codling moth damage. And so you can see some of the more common insect pests that we have here, along with some of the minor ones that we deal with down here below. If you haven't signed up for it, here's a good plug for the USU Fruit Tree Pest Advisory. You can either sign up for it by typing that in, and then up here in the top, you can subscribe to it, or you can just go out to the website and check at those on those issues. And the nice thing about it is what it does, you can see here, is that it's telling me that for codling moth, I need to protect my apple and pear trees in Tremont and Perry area by the 15th of May in Perry and by the 19th of May in Tremont, and that those greatest periods of egg hatch are going to be right here. And so if I maybe miss this date or I slip a little bit, I can come in and really this is when I need to have stuff on those trees to protect them from codling moth. Now, there's a couple of different options that I have here. Some of you might not be familiar with them, but I want to show you what Japanese apple bags look like. So these are little baggies, and what you do is you come in and you put those over top of each one of your apples or your peaches or pears on your tree, and that excludes that insect from going in there and being on those. And what you'll do is you'll leave those on your tree until you pull those off in the fall time of the year, and the insect pest is gone, and then they will ripen and color up for you. Here's another one that I've seen out on the internet now. These are more expensive. This is about 50 to 250 bucks, but it's excluding those insect pests. So you would come in and just cover the tree and leave this on. And I worry if you're in a windy area what that might do if you got a tree that might take some of that out. So, but there are some organic options out there. Here's some of the diseases that we have. And so coronium blight is what you're seeing here on this peach, usually on our stone fruits, what we see when we get some moisture in the springtime of the year and we have these on. Here's some fire blight on some apples and pear trees. And then you can see some other minor type diseases that we see here in Utah. We don't see a lot when we compare this to other places in other states. But again, there's some really good publications out there on the insects and diseases. And so I encourage you to go out and look at those. And I think I'm just about right. I hope, Wes. I know that's kind of a quick whirlwind tour here, but
No, it's perfect.